What is wrong with Texas A&M? We have injuries, inexperienced players having to play in prominent roles, coaching issues, X's and O's, so many things. And it's not any one of these things that plague Texas A&M. Rather, it's a combination of all of them. To what degree does each one affect the team? I don't know. We'll talk about that today. We're going to have to talk about some suspensions that just got handed out. Players not showing up to practice. Players doing things they shouldn't in the locker room. I'm sure you've heard the news by now. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about what's left to play for this season and just the state of the program. It's not a fun video to make anymore. I used to look forward to these Lay of the Aggie Land videos. I'm not looking forward to this one or making this one or talking about this stuff because when I think about what I want to talk about in these videos, I'm going pretty blank here. Because all I want to do is just spray out the emotions that you just see on social media all day, every day. You know, just trying to find a scapegoat, find a reason, just emotional reactions, which that's what we do. We're sports fans. I'm going to try to think about this thing. That's why I don't do a huge post-game video right after the game, because I could just blurt out all sorts of emotions. But we'll try to be as honest as possible. Try to look at things as rationally as possible. And go from there. So this is Lay of the Aggieland week, whatever it is now. I stopped counting. Maybe it's week 9. Lay of the Aggieland. Let's go. All right, let's start things off by addressing kind of how the country is looking at Texas A&M. Let's just bring it up. Been listening to a couple of talking heads, people like Feinbaum, SEC Mike, some of our favorites. And isn't it just so bad that these guys are all getting proven right, kind of getting what they want in terms of clickable talking points for their audiences, because a lot of people want to see Texas A&M fall, and they're getting what they want. Why is that? When you get the number 1 recruiting class, when you sign a coach that most people didn't think you had a chance of actually signing, you have some success under Jimbo Fisher, people want to see you fall. When you're on top, and Texas A&M is by no means on top, but they were trending upward quite significantly over the maybe previous, not counting the end of 2021, but before that, back to when they joined the SEC, Texas A&M was labeled the sleeping giant. Decent recruiting made into great recruiting under Jimbo. Call it what you will. Maybe it's jealousy. Maybe it's just hating those who are in a position of success. People love to see teams that aren't theirs, who are having success, fail. People love it. It's part of sports. It's part of politics. It's part of cancel culture. I hate to compare that to college football, but when a high-up celebrity does something unsavory, people just get off on dogging on them. It's just how it works. That's only part of the equation. Another part of it is the traditions, the Yell leaders, outsiders. If you're not part of it, you don't get it. It's an easy thing to make fun of and laugh at. I get that. And I think the combination of those two things, A&M's upward trend and the traditions that have been put even under more of a spotlight this year, kind of make people really love to hate Texas A&M. And they're just getting it. They're getting what they want right now. Texas A&M is off the rails, and there's no denying it. It's a fact. But why is A&M off the rails? If you ask social media, it's easy answer. It's Jimbo Fisher. And before I agree or disagree with that, I want to talk about other things that are also plaguing the team. We know injuries are all over the place, particularly at the offensive line, where there has not been any kind of consistency at all this season. At quarterback, had so many shuffles at quarterback. And at those two positions in particular on an offense, those are where you need the most continuity, because that's where most of the communication and reading takes place. Offensive line, every single O-lineman makes a call before the play. Quarterback obviously makes calls. Center makes a ton of calls. This is where you need chemistry and continuity, and this is where A&M has been extremely plagued by injury. And I don't know that necessarily Haynes or Max or Connor now at this age were ever going to be surefire things. But if you have the same guy in there, let's say it was Max Johnson from week 3 on, has been in there consistently, this team would probably be better off right now. But the O-line is in an even worse place than that. I mean, just Bryce Foster, Aggie, and Moko have all just been declared out for season. Say what you will about some of those guys. Others were stars on this team rising in Bryce Foster and Moko. And just continuity in general has been thrown out the window with this amount of turnover. You still have the same two guys on the right side, but the whole center going left is just an absolute mess on the O-line. And you're really only as good as your weakest link there. I don't see it getting fixed anytime soon. Young receivers are showing up. Love what I see from Evan Stewart. Love what I see from Donovan Green. But aside from them two, now that Chris Marshall is gone and Nice has been out, there's not much happening at the wide receiver group. It's hard to tell on an ESPN broadcast, but whenever it's a deep route scheme, there tends to be no one open, and the quarterback tends to hold on to the ball. Now, I don't know if that's a quarterback issue, a receiver issue, or the elephant in the room, which is the coaching. There are problems there still. But you love what you see from Evan Stewart becoming an absolute mainstay. He's found his rhythm. He's gained experience. I don't think his name has been mentioned in the recent round of suspensions or, ill-favored acts. So I think he's clear there. It feels like Evan Stewart's taken some steps, so that's positive. But aside from that, this receiver group doesn't really seem to be getting open downfield still. So that's still a problem. I'm sure the O-line and the quarterback being under constant pressure has something to do with this. And that O-line kind of looms over everything because even Devon Achane, as much as I hate to say it, has not really looked like himself the last couple of weeks. Yes, he's still good for some explosive runs here and there. He's a great back. But without the constant protection, without constant running lanes, without constant push, it seems like Achane has been kind of second-guessing himself a little bit, maybe a little bit too keen on cutting when he doesn't have to, maybe a little bit of happy feet. I mean, it seems like Achane's confidence has gotten knocked down a peg, and it has to do with O-line play, maybe coaching, quarterback play, offensive performance overall. It just seems like Achane is a little bit less confident now than what we've seen in the past, maybe thinking a little bit too much. And I don't think it's a fault of his own. He's a young player. He's a first-year starter. But when everything else is falling apart around you, it's really hard to keep your shit together. So, not good there either. I think what you need from Achane is a lot more than what you're getting, and I don't think it's really his fault. Kind of the offensive faults there, offensive deficiencies due to injury or what have you. Quickly, we'll talk about defense before we move on to other things. Maybe injuries still plaguing there, players getting back. But the bottom line on this defense is they're still playing well enough to win. Yes, you've had players in and out on defense all year, and of course there was the infamous three-man front era, which seems to be a thing of the past. As Texas A&M has gotten players back, they've been able to get back into their base defense. That's still the culprit in my opinion, was the injuries, is why they were in a three-man front. But this game, they were without some of their best players in Antonio Johnson, no Edgerrin Cooper, but they still held South Carolina only to maybe one or two successful touchdown drives. Everything else that South Carolina scored was either special teams or Texas A&M offense related. That's what got them their points. This has been a trend for Texas A&M throughout the Jimbo Fisher era. They've had defenses that play well enough to win you football games, but the offense still can't get it done. And I'm not here just to say that Jimbo Fisher's a bad coach. I don't think he is. But I think he needs to adjust, obviously. Anybody can say or see that. But he has shortcomings. I think Jimbo is the kind of coach that won't elevate an average to even slightly above average roster. And as talented as Texas A&M's roster is, the lack of experience does bring it down a peg or two. And I just don't think Jimbo in his current state is the kind of guy that's going to elevate that to a good or even great level. I mean, 5 years at A&M. We have the 2020 year that we look at as Jimbo's golden year. Jimbo's always been the play caller, right? Even that year, as good as the offense was at times, it did have its valleys. Think about the way the season started. That Vandy game was a slog. Getting destroyed, 28-point loss to Alabama. The way the season closed versus LSU, offense was very lackluster that game. And that was with as experienced an O-line as you'll get, as experienced a quarterback you'll get, good receivers in Weidemeyer and Anias, and even Spiller out of the backfield, a good running back tandem in Spiller and A-Chain. Pretty much what you would want from an offense. And as good as it was, it still had its shortcomings. Now, with the FSU championship year, Jimbo had everything you could ever need. And it wasn't an SEC schedule. But it was still a great team because Jimbo was able to coach that team with that talent, that quarterback, that receiver group, that running back, that O-line. That was doable for Jimbo. So it is an indictment. It is to say that Jimbo's not as good as an offensive coach as he once was or even thinks he is. Yeah, I guess that's what I'm saying. But also, you can't discredit the recruiting. You just can't. As much as you want to say NIL money, I think a lot of players are in that game, and the difference maker could be your head coach. And the amount of battles that Texas A&M wins, particularly late in recruiting signing periods, I think some credit has to be given to Jimbo, the CEO, head coach, in that regard. I think Jimbo will be defined by how many players he keeps both committed and from the transfer portal going into next year. Because this season is done, man. This season has crashed and burned. And I do want to transition into a couple other things. And I guess I just kind of naturally transitioned into my spiel on Jimbo, which led me to admitting that he's not a good offensive coach unless he has pristine, experienced talent or a Heisman quarterback or whatever. Gosh, there's more I want to say, though. Don't you hate a Jimbo interview? I mean, as I mentioned, things get weirder when you're losing. Like, I don't really mind that Jimbo literally carries an encyclopedia while he coaches. I didn't mind that in the 2020 year. But now that A&M's losing, I just want to scream, dude, put your papers down. Stop chewing players out as soon as they get to the sideline. Every quarterback, as soon as they come to the sideline, they're getting chewed out. Receivers, centers, whatever. Stop being that in game. Start being a steadfast leader. This team needs that. It's a young team. They need someone, yes, to hold them accountable, and the occasional chewing out is welcomed and loved. But be a steady leader. I mean, why don't you own up to some of what you're doing? Maybe instead of evaluating your team's lack of execution post-game, maybe evaluate your lack of execution. I am so sick of a Jimbo interview. I am so sick of the same coach speak over and over again. As much as I love Andrew Monaco, I'm a Spurs fan. I'm from San Antonio. As much as I love him, I cannot stand Jimbo's Wednesday interview. Wednesday's, hour with Monaco at Rudy's. That just feels like a circle jerk. Like, Monaco just tees him off because, what can Monaco even do at this point? He knows what he's going to get from Jimbo. And it just seems like, yeah, Monaco's going to ask some grand philosophical coaching philosophy, and Jimbo's going to give one of his 20 preloaded answers in the chamber. Oh, man. I don't think it's necessary. This is not an indictment. I don't think the way you interview is necessarily the way you coach, but when you're losing, you wish to hear a little bit more ownership. You wish to hear a little bit more accountability. And I'm sure Jimbo is holding himself accountable, but that's not evident by what he says in interviews. It's the most coach-speaky of coach speak you can ever get in Jimbo Fisher. And I don't understand how some people can say otherwise. Jimbo is the king of coach speak. Let's just get that out there. Him and Kirby Smart. If Kirby can coach speak and win a championship, Jimbo can coach speak and do better than he's doing now, okay? It's not an indictment. It's just a frustration. Once again, things get weird when you start losing. Anyway, I think I would be wasting time if I went on a spiel about what A&M needs to do to fix what's going on. I'll be brief with it, and I may have mentioned all this stuff before. It's a bad look what you're putting out there, Steve Adazio. It is a bad damn look, and as little continuity, as much excuse as I, a dumbass fan, just gave you, you're still performing worse than I think you should by a considerable margin. Also, the false starts, penalties, offensive line, and the fact that players are regressing, and the fact that you were on video this camp cussing at, screaming at your players, and yes, it's football, that shit happens, but to berate players and then to have this product on the field, I'm of the opinion that is a terrible look. And I think Adazio should be on the hottest of hot seats right now. I mean, I don't know if Jimbo will fire him, because Jimbo's the one that will ultimately make that decision, because I don't think Jimbo wants to be seen or wants to acknowledge that he made a bad choice there by firing him. But I think you have to have a new O-line coach next year, right? I mean, what do you guys think? Am I off base here? New O-line coach just because of what you've shown this year, and then that footage of you yelling at players? I mean, maybe I'm being sensitive about that. And maybe it was nothing. But it does seem like he's really hard on those players. And for the product that we're seeing now, I don't think it's acceptable. That's just me, one dumbass fan. Secondly, I mean, I'm really not going to spend much more than a few sentences on this because everyone has talked and seen and acknowledged that this is true. Jimbo needs to hire a real offensive coordinator and take a step back and become the CEO of this team, focus on being a leader rather than a play caller and a guy that just chews people out. Moving on, I want to address the suspensions and everything like that. How many times has Denver Harris been in the forefront of this kind of stuff this year? He had the speeding in the parking garage incident, which I don't think was reprimanded in any way that we know about, which of course is terrible. I mean, you're in a tight corridor. What if someone just walks around the corner? Some innocent person walks around the corner, some student, some child of a family, a kid, a daughter, a son, and you kill them. I mean, that's one thing. Second of all, he was part of that suspension with the players sneaking out for the party versus Miami. He didn't play that game. And this is his third strike, smoking weed in the locker room. I mean, come on. Is this the kind of guy we want on the team? I say emphatically no. I don't care what kind of talent you have. I don't care how it affects the team. I don't think that guy should suit up again for Texas A&M. That's just my opinion. Who am I? I'm an idiot. Chris Marshall, he's on pretty thin ice as well. He didn't speed through the garage at risk of killing people. He only has done things to hurt himself and the team. But he was part of the weed smoking thing. He was part of that suspension with the sneak out versus Miami. And of course, I am only speaking on what I've heard from reputable sources, that being Billy Lucci, Texags. I mean, say what you will about him, he is the most connected person to the team. I'm just going off of his tweet, or no, his forum post. He posted it, and we trust his at least reporting on the team. So I will acknowledge that as truth. Beyond that, I don't have any confirmation of anything else. There are also a couple other players who were first-time offenders who got snagged smoking weed in the locker room. Whatever. But those two guys who are so talented, who have secure roles within this offense, to have second and third strikes against them, is that Jimbo losing the locker room, or is that just having people like that in the locker room? Maybe those are the kind of guys you don't want there that do hurt this team big picture-wise. I don't know. Again, just an idiot fan. I am all but done with Denver, and I think Chris Marshall, you got to be on like a last strike kind of deal right now with him. Anyways, I'm very glad that Jimbo is not afraid to suspend these guys. That's a good sign to me. That's a good sign. I think Jimbo has shown that he could be a great CEO. That's a great sign for Jimbo the CEO, Jimbo the head coach, that he is not afraid to suspend these 5-star athletes. No bullshit. You do that kind of thing, you're suspended. I think that's a great sign for Jimbo in that role. Will he take it? I don't know. But it's really disappointing to see that, especially after the turmoil the team has been in. It makes you think they don't care. It makes you think they're not willing to get better. So the hell with them, especially that one. Finally, I wanted to talk about what this team has left to play for this year. I'm sorry if I've been all over the place. Obviously, there's emotion involved. I tried to keep it emotionless, but about 5 or 10 minutes ago, I decided I just need to say some things. Let's get back on track. Got Ole Miss coming up. You got Florida at home. You got Auburn on the road. You got UMass at home. You got LSU. You have 3 wins on the year. You need to win 3 of those to make a bowl. You need to win all of those to go 8-4. Right now, the ceiling is the joke. 8-4. Texas A&M is 8-4 University. That was the joke. That is now the ceiling, and I don't think we're going to hit it. I think A&M will win more games this year. Hell, they could even win out. We don't know. But if you're a betting man, you're not betting on that. I think they beat UMass because they're even worse than App State. And I think A&M's learned that lesson to not take any opponent lightly. I think they'll beat UMass. Where do you find another 2 wins? I think it has to start this coming Saturday, right? Because if you're going to go home after a month and a half, 6 weeks, and you're going to lay another egg, I don't know what's left to improve on or show this year. There's not really much left to begin with. But if you go ahead and do that, no. You have to go beat Ole Miss. You have to win this week. And you had to win last week. But you're coming home. That changes the tone. That changes the perspective of things. Go home, protect Kyle Field, win, and I think if you win this week, you do make a bowl game because you will find UMass and maybe one more win there. The injuries are piled up. The suspensions are piling up. But you're going to maybe see some guys that want to be in the locker room now. A couple of those bad apples may be gone. Hopefully that's the positive outlook. You hope that these were the bad apples maybe dragging people down. You hope that, and that they're gone, suspended, out of the way. That allows people who really want to be here to step up into the forefront. And you really just hope they're proud to come home. They show some pride. And I'll do a breakdown on the Ole Miss game in a day or two. But I think it all starts right there. If you lose this one coming home, you don't even feel like you can protect home turf anymore. I mean, you've got to beat Ole Miss. It would be a joy if A&M could win out, but I said that last week going into the South Carolina game. And I don't want to make any mistake about it. South Carolina is not that good of a team. Texas A&M outgained them, out-first down them, out-time of possession them. But South Carolina outcoached Texas A&M. Their team was ready out the gates. They were fueled off the crowd, and the crowd was fueled off the way they started that game. That thing just became like a hive mind. Like the game and the crowd were just feeding off each other. It was like this one big energy that just overcame A&M. And I think it was because of lack of coaching to start the game out. I'm going back to Jimbo for a second. Why is slow starts out of breaks or bye weeks or timeouts, why is that such a thing for Jimbo? You come out of the 2-week break, slowest start we've ever seen from Texas A&M. You come out of a timeout, delay of game, false start. You come out of a TV break, delay of game, false start. Bad play. Turnover. It's such a thing. Anyway, protect home field. Ole Miss is of paramount importance. You have to win this week. But let's see, was there anything else I wanted to touch on? No, I guess I'll give some kind of profound overarching statement. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, there are many things plaguing this team. Injuries, youth, inexperience, and of course, coaching. And I think there's some sort of ratio to be had between all of those. And I'll go ahead and say it. The overwhelming majority within that ratio, the overwhelming reason for A&M's downfall has to be coaching. Because there's enough talent on this team to not lose, at least not lose to App State and South Carolina. Maybe to win a winnable game at Alabama, where you're one play away from winning. That was a winnable game. And maybe not just to have the egregious errors that you had against Mississippi State. I think you're so close with what you have right now that you have to say coaching is the main reason that A&M is losing to App State and South Carolina. So yes, they're all playing a factor, and it's a big problem. It's a big mesh of problems. Maybe Maybe some of these 5-star guys that are getting into trouble are bad apples in the locker room as well. Maybe you can throw that into the witch's cauldron. But I think your main ingredient has to be lackluster coaching, particularly on offense. And that comes back to Jimbo Fisher, the play caller, not the CEO. We need Jimbo Fisher, the CEO, because I think Jimbo Fisher, the CEO, could be great based on what he's shown. Hopefully that wraps it up. I'm sorry if I was all over the place, but you know how these things go. I tried to be organized at the start, but we just let it ride at the end. But if you like this video and you feel the same way I do, please comment, like, subscribe. It helps me greatly. As painful as it is to make these things, I'm going to keep making them, and I want to keep making them and provide info and provide just insight and hopefully less emotional opinions than what you're used to. But you know, how can we not? I mean, I wear this ring. Of course I'm going to have some emotion. But I try to look at things as rational as possible. I appreciate you guys. I'll see you in a couple of days for the Ole Miss game preview. Good luck this week. Keep your mind off of things. It's all good. Gig 'em.